All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here recording on Tuesday evening for our March 23rd, episode number 44. We've got bombarded again with another huge wave of free agency news, some trades, lots to talk about. So we're going to go through a lot of the content on insiders and headliners. And then we're going to get into a little bit of free agency buy and sell. So who are some fantasy players that we're looking at buying and selling here after this huge wave of free agency and trades and news, et cetera, et cetera. So before we get into a little bit about our episode here, let's say hello to the fellas first. Let's throw it over to Armand. What's going on? What's going on? Keeping you busy there, Armand?
Hey, I went and sat on the bench for our senior boys during the weekend here. For regionals, and they ended up punching their ticket to Hoopla. So anyone who's not from Saskatchewan, Hoopla is the provincial championship for all basketball, regardless of school size, 1A, 2A, all the way to 5A. It's the provincial championship for each division.
And I was watching a lot of the girls on they had the live broadcast on Facebook. So I was watching theirs because they were out of town there, so they punched their ticket too. So it's pretty exciting for the old high school. I think three or four of the Prince Albert high school teams are going on, so it's exciting for the area. Zach, what about yourself? Keeping busy or what?
Trying to, yeah. Nothing exciting as you guys. But the warm weather been getting the yard nice and ready. So moving some snow, trying to help it melt. Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's my street is almost undrivable right now. Like the ruts, they actually just cleared it out here today, but it was like nobody could move unless you had 4x4. You weren't moving on our block. It was unbelievable. But
absolutely, over the weekend I saw 2 cars get hung up as I was chipping ice.
And Zach just does the old friendly wave. Okay, see ya.
Yeah. Oh, it's time to go to the backyard. All right.
We got lucky in our street. We had it plowed on Thursday right before the really warm weather hit. So I've been driving on nice fresh pavement all week or weekend so far.
Yeah, it's probably bone dry in front of your place.
Oh yeah, except what my neighbors are throwing onto the street.
That has got to be one of my biggest pet peeves, when you shovel and push it right into the street. I don't know why, but oh man, I hate that so much.
Yeah, it bothers me too.
Oh yeah, right now it's playoff hockey right now for myself for most of my leagues except for one. So it's driving around doing some playoff. And for those of you listening that don't know, I just about totaled off my car a while ago. So we've been kind of doing a hodgepodge trying to figure out what vehicles it takes. We took a rental to Melfort on Friday, and our rental car broke down on the way to Melfort. We're reffing game 1, first series playoff game, supposed to be getting mentally focused, and the car breaks down. It's just been, don't ask me for car advice, because I'll either find a way for you to get hit by a deer, or it'll break down, or it'll be a lemon, or I don't know. Worse luck, but about as good of luck as I had on my March Madness bracket. It's been that thing got busted pretty quick too. But we'll get into a little bit of fantasy talk here. Before we get going, we got a big thank you to the Prince Albert Herald and to Kyle Koslin for writing up a little article for us from the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast, and kind of sharing our story about how we got started and a little bit of our charity work and our donation we did there. So that was awesome to read and to be able to see that. And I know we got a lot of excellent feedback because of not only from his article, but also from obviously the charitable work that we were doing. So that was pretty awesome to see yesterday roll out. So if you haven't got a chance to do so, go give that a read on the Daily Herald. It was really well written. And before we get started, we got some awesome news. Next episode, we'll be dropping our major sponsor of the year. It's awesome news, big news, a little secret, and we'll be doing a little bit of social media work and dropping that here in the next coming episode. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that exciting drop. But without further ado, here, let's get a little insiders and headliners going.
I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story.
I'm Ron Burgundy. I don't think that gets old ever. That's going to be good forever. Insiders and headliners. This is one of those ones where the heck do we start? We've had 4 massive trades and then some pretty big signings here. So I think let's start with the trades. That's probably the most important fantasy aspect here. That's going to have some huge implications moving forward. Let's start with the first one. Devontae Adams, wide receiver from the formerly of the Green Bay Packers, has been traded to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 2022 first and second round pick, and then immediately signs a 5-year deal worth $141.25 million, making him the highest paid wide receiver in the league. So this came as a shocker because I think a lot of people automatically made the assumption that Adams was going to obviously stick around. They signed Rodgers, they franchise tag Adams. As kind of was, this is what everybody was expecting. And all of a sudden, holy man, Adams is on the move. So I guess what's the huge fantasy follow implication for this, Zach? What do you think's the biggest implication here with this Adams move?
I think it really changes the landscape of the 2 quarterbacks that are involved in this trade. I think you can make a reasonable argument to bump Aaron Rodgers down a little bit in your redraft and your dynasty rankings, as well as presumably bump up Derek Carr, getting a familiar weapon to a offense that wasn't anything to shrug at, I guess, last season. So I can see both quarterbacks kind of going in opposite directions pre-draft, and then certainly it wouldn't surprise me if they finished quite differently at the end of this upcoming season
and then
than they did this past season.
And Armand, do you think, thinking about Adams wise, does this status quo for his value? Does it go up? What is it down? What do you think about for Adams? Obviously, the connection with Rodgers was something to relish for fantasy owners, but are we going to see more of the same with Carr, or do you think we're going to see a bit of a dip in Adams' production?
I don't think it should be too much of a dip. I don't expect him to do better than he did in Green Bay, but I think if it's a dip, it's going to be a pretty small dip that's going to keep him pretty near the top of your fantasy radar and being a valuable number 1 receiver on your fantasy teams. Carr reads the game fairly well, and Adams is a great route runner, just like Renfro. But he's a little bit bigger, right? A little bit faster. So I think he's going to pair well in that team, and it's going to be a pretty good offense to draft from. I think this actually probably helps out Renfro in the end, because teams are going to be hardcore keen in on Adams, and that'll open up Renfro and others within that offense. And I'm kind of hinting at what you're going to talk about later there, Jordan.
Yeah.
But
Nice little tidbit. Yeah, I think obviously if you're comparing Derek Carr to Aaron Rodgers, there's a gap, right? Aaron Rodgers is significantly better quarterback than Derek Carr is. But when a new wide receiver goes into a new system, you usually expect a little bit of a dip or a lull or a grace period where they need to make that connection. But this is familiar territory between Adams and Carr, obviously going and playing college together. So I can't imagine it's going to be a huge dip, but it'll be definitely one of those things to monitor. I think obviously that AFC is getting better and better as some of these significant players are leaving the NFC and heading to the AFC, especially the AFC West there. It's that's going to be absolute insanity to be able to come out of that division.
Well, and that's part of the thing too, hey, Jordan, is that the games are going to be a lot closer for Las Vegas. They're going to be in passing down situations a lot more than if he would have stayed in Green Bay, where they end up playing with a lead for a lot of games, right? So even though maybe the efficiency might not be quite what Adams is used to, he probably still is going to see tons of opportunities and maybe even more opportunities in Las Vegas. And that might kind of balance out him having a little bit of dip in efficiency with just pure volume.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The next big offer we're going to talk about here, and this one was absolutely insane. And even reports came out this morning that the deal actually kind of changed a little bit. But Deshaun Watson has been traded to Cleveland from the Houston Texans. Now, this deal was originally reported that it was 3 firsts, a second and a fourth, if I remember correctly, or second and a fifth, but I think it's altered a little bit here. Just within the last day, some of the contingencies on the deal had changed a little bit, But as soon as the deal was done, Watson signed an extension, or I guess an altering of his contract to a new 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed deal. So when you look at this contract, there's a few different aspects you can look at it. One, Watson obviously moving on from Houston, that saga has ended and now starting in Cleveland. You look at the fantasy perspective and how that changes, obviously, the potential of the run game in Cleveland. It's going to maybe change, obviously, maybe some of the culture in Cleveland of their offense, maybe not a run first, maybe more pass heavy. But at the same time, you look at the situation where he's getting paid $230 million guaranteed, and we don't know what the suspension is going to come from. We don't know the ramifications from obviously his legal aspects. We know it's not going to be criminal. Obviously, we went through that last episode, but that doesn't mean it's not settled yet. So there's still lots that can happen. So there's two different frames we can go. Obviously, I think we've beaten the dead horse a little bit on the Watson, talking about the legal implications. So maybe sticking to the fantasy. What's our biggest takeaway on this one there, Zach?
I think pre-Watson trade, you might have been possibly lukewarm on the outlook of Amari Cooper, but following this trade, it is full steam ahead, all sails go. Whatever little saying or phrase you want to use, it is Amari Cooper season, I think.
Yeah, Armand, do you think Watson is suspended this year? Do you think if he is, how many games do you think he's going to get?
It's hard to see him not be suspended, especially with 22 civil suits, right? So, but it all would come down to the ruling, right? But I know in the past, right, there's been some players who have been suspended even before things have come down to the ruling. So you got to expect he'll be suspended for a few games at least. But I think in the end, he'll be there for the fantasy playoffs. And so will those players that are on that roster. And so it wouldn't hurt to invest in them or do kind of like what we were talking about last year with Wentz when he went down with injury with the Colts, is try and trade for Colts players later in the season. Maybe we do that with Cleveland this year, where you don't draft Cooper and redraft, but you try and trade for him after the first few weeks. But in Dynasty, I think you got to make maybe a move on Cooper right now, and even other receivers in that Browns offense. Like, I've dropped his name quite a few times. I think he's probably going to be my guy this year, Donovan Peoples-Jones, especially after that Rashad Higgins signed somewhere else. So,
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The one interesting part about the possibility of a suspension is, remember the Zeke situation where we thought he was going to start the year suspended and he didn't happen until like week 10, and then the suspension rolled into the fantasy playoffs. I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm not much of a Watson owner at all. I don't have him in any of my leagues. But if you are the Watson owner, you're really hoping that suspension comes right off the hop, so you know what you're getting come the fantasy season. If the season starts, he's not suspended, then that suspension possibly comes mid-season. That's going to throw a real wrench in your plans and obviously how you draft it and how you're going to be attacking free agency moving forward. So hopefully that is something that is dealt with either right off the hop or you don't see until the upcoming season, because it could cause a lot of headaches for fantasy owners for sure. Another deal here, another quarterback on the move. Matt Ryan was traded to Indianapolis for a 2020 third-round pick. In this deal, Atlanta is taking on the full dead cap of $40.525 million, which is the largest in NFL history. And in this Atlanta deal, moving away from Matt Ryan, obviously left the door open for a quarterback position. Then Atlanta goes and signs Marcus Mariota to a 2-year, $18.75 million deal, which then later turned into a 1-year, $6.75 million deal with a 2023 option of $12 million. So technically it's a 1-year deal with an option, but if he does stick around for the full 2-year deal, then it is a nearly a $19 million deal. So 2 parts here. Atlanta seemingly throwing in the towel on the season already and hoping for some good draft capital, because they don't have any wide receivers to mention at this point. They have a poor offensive line. They didn't have a quarterback for a while. They're going to be trying out Marcus Mariota here. So Atlanta, we're in a really, really weird situation with where they're going to move forward here in the draft. And then obviously Matt Ryan going into Indianapolis, who should have been a playoff team, but is going to be, I think, a great position for some fantasy aspects. So you look at a guy like Michael Pittman. I know, Armand, you have Michael Pittman. You've always been a fan of him, as well as myself as a USC guy. But is this a bump up, obviously, with Matt Ryan, or do you think it's something we can continue to see similar trends from Carson Wentz, or is this good, bad, or a neutral offer? I think. What do you think, Armand?
I could see this being pretty good for Pittman and the other receivers there. This might be a rejuvenate Matt Ryan kind of thing. He might find his swag back and be willing to get back to slinging the ball down the field. We see Pittman as a big body contested catch kind of guy down the sideline, and that's kind of where Julio made his bread and butter, right? So I see a bit of a similarity there. I could see Matt Ryan and Pittman being a great combination together.
Saw a little bit on Twitter there, Zach. Do you think Julio follows Matt Ryan and does a little welcome back party together in a new team, or do you think that's just a little Twitter fun?
You know what? I've seen a lot of speculation about Julio Jones going here, Julio Jones going there. I think at this point in his career and this point in time, Julio's name carries a lot more weight than his on-field production does.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't shock me if Matt Ryan might get a little bit of that veteran quarterback, general manager leeway that we often see these veteran quarterbacks get. And if he's passionate and adamant about reuniting with Jones, I could see the Colts doing something like that, because the Colts do still have quite a bit of cap room.
Yeah, and they have a team that I would say their window is open. You know, they do have a lot of young pieces to their organization. Looking at obviously Jonathan Taylor and looking at Michael Pittman, especially fantasy aspects. But they have a window now where we're now with an older quarterback. They're set for a championship run, and they were obviously very vocal on that they were quarterback away, and obviously shipping off Wentz after 1 year. So hopefully Matt Ryan fills that void for them, and we can see the Colts making a playoff push. Because I know a lot of 306 listeners out there are Colts fans. So fingers crossed for you Colts fans. One last trade here to talk about, and then we'll go through a few signings before we move on to our keep trade cut and our segment of the episode. Was Robert Woods after the Los Angeles Rams had signed Allen Robinson, which we'll get to in a little bit. They ended up trading Robert Woods away to Tennessee for a 2022 6th-round pick. So this one's going to be an interesting one. I know, Armin, you wanted to talk about maybe whether you thought this was the same or upgrade or downgrade. Maybe you want to mention that.
I think Woods here, especially with, like we were talking, Julio, his name carries more value than his actual play right now. And Woods, I think, is almost the opposite. He's always been kind of underrated and quietly gets his yardage. And I think him and AJ Brown together will be a better tandem than him and Julio. Robert Woods isn't an alpha, but he is a great receiver. So AJ can continue to go out there, be the guy for Tennessee, and then Robert Woods can quietly go about his business and be a quiet wide receiver 2 on the season again, like he usually is.
Always underrated. But Armin mentioned it, a couple of roster cuts here. Julio Jones obviously released from the Tennessee Titans, so Robert Woods is replacing that void of Julio Jones. We mentioned a few times about Julio possibly ending up certain places. And then also Buffalo has released Cole Beasley, opening up the doors for a couple signings and some younger players in Buffalo. But I'm going to go through these signings relatively quick. We'll go position by position and let me know if there's something you want to talk about. I think the quarterback one's pretty simple. I don't think there's a lot to mention here, but Matthew Stafford gets a 4-year extension worth $160 million, 135 of that guaranteed. And Jameis Winston re-signs with New Orleans. They were in the whole Sean Watson saga, possible sweepstakes. They lost and ended up re-signing Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $28 million deal instead. So now they've got their quarterback locked up. Running back position, J.D. McKissick does the old psych, says he's going to go to Buffalo and then pulls the pin and goes to Washington for the exact same $7 million 2-year deal that they were going to sign with in Buffalo. So kind of squashing all the conversation we had about Gibson RB1 type season, possible breakout year, 3-down back situation. Raheem Mostert signs with Miami to a 1-year, $3 million deal. Cordell Patterson re-signs with Atlanta for a 2-year, $10.5 million deal. Armand's guy, Rashad Penny, resigns with Seattle for a 1-year, $5.75 million deal. And then this is the big one. This morning, Leonard Fournette re-signs with Tampa Bay for a 3-year, $21 million deal. Now, I know we want to talk about Leonard Fournette, but maybe I'll save that one because I know Zach wants to talk about him a little bit later on in the episode. So maybe we'll hang tight on that one. Wide receivers, Chris Godwin was franchise tag, but will not play on the tag because he has signed a 3-year deal with Tampa Bay worth $60 million. So it's good for Tampa Bay to be able to lock him down because they had him on a 2-year franchise tag. Allen Robinson, which we mentioned, signed a 3-year, $46.5 million deal, which $30.7 million of that is guaranteed with the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are just finding deeper and deeper pockets and somehow signing these big names. They said they still want to be able to keep Odell Beckham. They have Van Jefferson, obviously Cooper Kupp. They just keep finding this money, and I don't know where it's coming from. But Allen Robinson maybe get a kickstart here now in a new facility and a new team. Now, talking about that, do you think? I've seen this thrown around a little bit. So I'm going to throw this one at you, Zach. Allen Robinson for a back end first. Would you do that trade in a dynasty, or do you think he's washed? Do you think he still got it? Do you think he doesn't have to be the centerpiece? Obviously, Cooper Kupp's going to be wide receiver 1 there, so maybe he can finally be the wide receiver 2 and not have that pressure. But what is his dynasty outlook? I suppose is the question I'm asking.
Well, this year's rookie crop, as far as I can tell, is significantly weaker at a few key positions than it has been in years past. It's still a talented wide receiver pool of talent, but the running back position isn't what it has been the previous years. The quarterback position certainly isn't, and the tight end position is not as well. So one would assume that at, say, like 110 to 112, the back end of the first, you're probably looking at the second or third best running back, maybe, or like a fifth or sixth, maybe even seventh best receiver. Lots of times those 6, 7, 8 receivers turn into like a Jalen Reagor or a Denzel Mims or a Terrence Marshall a lot more often than they do like like a Justin Jefferson, for example. So I would probably lean towards an Allen Robinson, hoping that what we saw last year was more of a blip on the radar, him not being on the same page as the organization, him not necessarily wanting to be there, and hoping that he's able to turn it around as the receiver 2 in a very potent offense, or what seems to be a very potent offense in LA.
For sure. Another couple signings here. DJ Moore gets an extension, a 3-year extension worth $61.9 million. 41.6 of that is guaranteed. And then Juju Smith-Schuster signs a 1-year, $10.75 million deal. We're going to talk a little bit more extensively about him here in an upcoming segment as well. So a few big name wide receivers getting some big money. We'll see what ends up their change of landscape or some big dollars, if that's going to change their fantasy outlook, and see what that does to the old ADP as we drive close to the fantasy season. A couple tight ends. Austin Hooper was cut by Cleveland and then was signed by Tennessee for a 1-year, $6 million deal. Gerald Everett signs a 2-year, $12 million deal, $8 million guaranteed. I think that's going to be a little sneaky one here with him landing up with the Chargers. And then Hayden Hurst signing a 1-year deal with Cincinnati, replacing CJ Uzomah. So a few tight ends making a big signing as well. Gerald Everett, any of you guys a little maybe interested in Gerald Everett? I think obviously it's a good offense. Gerald Everett's had a lot of hype around him for quite a few years now. Is that somebody that maybe you'd be targeting later in drafts there, Armand, as a tight end sleeper, or are you kind of maybe gone to the well too many times with Everett?
He's still young enough and the talent is there. if he's in an offense where he's gonna be looked at a little bit more, he's definitely worth it. So just who did he sign with again?
The Chargers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, Cook looked good there last year. He's behind a lot of high-end receivers there, but he could make a splash, and I imagine he'd do a little bit more damage than Cook because he's a little bit younger, a little bit quicker yet. I like him. I back end of draft kind of thing, but I wouldn't be reaching for him, that's for sure.
Yeah, especially what's that Donald Parham? I think he's pretty young. He's a pretty big body too. So it's interesting if they split the load or one person takes over. But that was one position that we were talking about as the Chargers would have been a juicy little landing spot for a premier tight end because there might be some value there. So that might be a name worth throwing out there as we get towards the draft season. But
yeah, definitely worth taking a flyer on
for sure. A little keep trade cut here, Armand. What do you figure?
All right, let's do her.
I'm still working on a good drop for your keep trade cut segment here. So I apologize. We haven't got one yet, but I'm still working on it. It's coming. It's down the pipeline here, but keep trade cut. We got the new Holmes edition. So 3 wide receivers that are landing in new positions. And what are you going to do with them, Arm? We got Allen Robinson landing with the Los Angeles Rams. We got Devontae Adams landing with the Las Vegas Raiders. And then we have Juju Smith-Schuster landing with Kansas City. So what are you doing? Keep trade cut.
See, the last two on this one are a little bit harder, I think, between Allen Robinson and Juju, but I'll start with my keep. I'm keeping Devontae Adams. He's just too good to try and trade away. Plus, people might have a hard time buying into him right now. So the value you get for him might not necessarily be the same as what he's probably actually worth. So just keep holding on to him and knowing that he will produce. And even if there's a slight drop, at least once people see him producing, then maybe you could trade him away. Between Robinson and Juju, like I said, this one's real tough. I'm thinking I want to cut Robinson and keep Juju, mostly based on, or trade Juju, I guess, mostly based on age here. I think Juju might be a little bit easier sell with that Kansas City offense. He'll be the third wheel, but they've been missing that for some time, and maybe he'll be able to produce for them, especially on those underneath throws and those short throws. Whereas Allen Robinson, I'm not buying it yet. I know you guys just talked about him potentially having a resurgence after a blip year, but you try and trade him now, you're not getting a lot for him, where I think you might get a little bit more for Juju.
Zach, do you agree or do you disagree with that, with the statement?
I think for the most part, I agree. I would say that I think Devontae Adams would still return a heck of a haul in a trade. But other than that, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I like the Juju idea because looking back, he's had a couple of tough years here, obviously battling some injuries and whatnot. But when he had his, 1,400-yard season there, that was when he was the wide receiver 2 next to Antonio Brown. So now that he's in a position where he doesn't have to be the guy, doesn't have to be the secondary guy like Travis Kelce's probably the 2, and like you mentioned, Aaron, he's the 3. This might be an opportunity to see a resurgence of Juju in an offense where he doesn't have to be relied on to carry the load. And he has a knack of being able to find those open spaces. So maybe that's a position. I do like Juju. I mean, it's a long shot because he has a tertiary weapon on a good offense. So he's probably not a guy that you're taking higher in drafts, but he's one of those guys that, the old trustees, I think, like the Robert Woods of years prior, when you take him in the 5th round and he'd always just plug and play and get you 8 points, maybe have a big week, but you'd be happy with what you got kind of thing. I think he's going to be in that similar boat, and they might have the maybe 6th round ADP. Is that something that we might want to jump on board? We'll see what happens to get close to the year. But I think that is a name that's definitely worth monitoring as we look into the preseason and those first couple weeks coming into the draft season, because I think he might be a sneaky play this year. Getting to our segment of the episode here. We're doing free agent buy and sell. So we're each going to buy a player and we're each going to sell a player that has been impacted by free agency or was signed during the free agency period. So we'll do our buys first, and we'll start with Zach. Zach, who are you buying here from free agency?
So this is maybe a little bit of a cheat, as he wasn't a free agent signing as much as he was a re-sign. But I am enjoying the idea of possibly buying Leonard Fournette this offseason. From all the research that I have done and the articles that I have seen, currently he is averaging about round 7 value in drafts that are happening as of right now in the preseason. And that is exceptionally good value for a running back that finished in the top 10 this year in PPR standings. He finished the season as running back 7. Tampa Bay has seen a few players leave their offensive line this offseason, namely Ali Marpet retiring and Alex Kappa signing with the Bengals. But they were able to sucker the Patriots into giving up Shaq Mason, who was one of the best run blocking guards in the NFL. And I have full confidence that towards the back half of the first round, they may be in a good position to get a guard or interior offensive lineman to fill one of those pieces that left. So I really think Leonard Fournette is somebody that is routinely slept on the past couple of years, and he is somebody that has proven the ability to produce at a high level. So I would try to buy Leonard Fournette at his current draft value, and I would put out a feeler to your league mates in Dynasty to see their temperature on him right now.
Yeah, speaking of Leonard Fournette here, can't forget the Fournetter. I got a little clip for him here. Made a little sound bite.
Get the net.
Oh yeah, a little Fournette action. He's a guy, I think that his ADP is going to be still not high enough when it comes to draft season. You hit the nail on the head there, Zach. Underrated. Like, he's going to be, I think, a late second, maybe early third ADP type guy, probably on that back end second more than likely. And not just like you're the only guy left in town. You're the running back of a Tom Brady offense, and who did damage in the passing game last year. Like, just to me, like, I just think that's cheap. Even as a late second round, mid second round, I think that's cheap ADP in comparison to what you're going to be getting. Like, I think he's got himself set up for a great season. Armand, who's your buy?
All right, my buy is Jamison Crowder, who came over from the Jets to sign with the Buffalo Bills. He is a PPR machine. He's kind of built in the same class as Cole Beasley, who we've seen over a number of years have success in Buffalo and be an underrated kind of fantasy asset. And I think Jamison Crowder is a better receiver than Beasley. And I'm looking up for good things here with Crowder being that small guy that's just getting nice and open for Allen on his rollouts and everything.
This is one of those ones that I like because it's not going to cost you a ton. Like, there's a chance that he could be sitting on the waiver wire. You know, like he's relatively his percentage own is relatively low, so you can even scoop him on the waiver wire. Or if you go into a trade, he could be a throw-in piece for a lot of trade offers. You know, you could go for a medium piece, like say you want to go after a Juju. You could go after Juju and you could have a Crowder as a throw-in. Like, you to be able to go pick him up is not going to cost a lot, but he's a guy that could be a PPR machine. And those are the types of offers that I don't think get enough attention because everyone wants to go after the big names. But when you can sneak in those little sneaky names that can produce in a big way, I think those are ones that help people out a lot. My buy is an interesting one we talked about a little bit earlier. And I think this is a one where if you tried to buy him last year, it was impossible. It wasn't going to happen. You couldn't make it. You couldn't make it because it was just going to cost you too much. Then he had a bit of a down year this year. And I think even still, the price of him was a little bit too high. But now, since the Devontae Adams signing, I think he's kind of in a position where people are nervous about Darren Waller. But I'm in a position where I'd be going to buy Darren Waller. Now, it is a little bit concerning, and with this purchase, there is a little bit of risk in there, but that's why you might be able to get him on the cheaper side. After a down year and the resurgence of a PPR type machine coming out of Clemson there, he had a huge year, and we saw Darren Waller kind of dip a little bit in that season. Now, he also battled with injury that goes into that, but he had played 11 games, 55 receptions, 665 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, Darren Waller's never been a touchdown guy. He's always been a possession guy and a reception guy. So now with Devontae Adams in town, and he's going to be battling a little bit for targets, people are concerned that Darren Waller's not going to be able to get it done because you can't rely on the touchdowns. He's just never really been a touchdown type guy. So that's where the ADP is starting to dip a little bit. Now, I think this is a position that's going to be successful for Darren Waller, because he's a little bit on the younger side in comparison to some of those high-end tight ends like Kelsey. You could be getting Kittle. You could go after Mark Andrews, who's a little bit younger than Darren Waller, but for getting Darren Waller, had a huge season the year prior. Now, having the attention to Adams, there's an exact argument that Armand made earlier, was that Renfro might be the beneficiary of that. But I also think that Darren Waller very well could be the beneficiary of Adams there, because the primary defense is going to be going to double teams or scheming towards Adams, which might open up Waller underneath. You look at Kansas City offense that thrives with a wide receiver 1, and then Kelsey is kind of that underlayer with huge talent, big body, good hands, and can do damage. I think Darren Waller could do that. Now, in a position, would I offer? I'm in a position where I have Kelsey and I'm trying to go after Waller. Maybe you can, in a position, maybe you could offer Waller, Kelsey straight out to a competing team, a team that is in a win now position, and they need something that's going to get them over the hump. You might be able to get that Waller, Kelsey straight up. I'm even in a position maybe where I'll go Kelsey and something over top. You could. There's lots of different options, but Kelsey, there might not be many years left in front of him. Maybe we've seen the best years he's got left. With the signing of Juju, maybe it comes down a little bit, where I think Darren Waller, this is probably the cheapest you're going to get him, unless obviously he tanks and then nobody's going to want to purchase Darren Waller. So I think this is a good time as a fantasy owner. If you're looking for that good tight end 1, top 5 potential, I think now's a good opportunity to go pick up some Darren Waller. Zach, your sell.
All right. So I am at least thinking about the idea of selling Christian Kirk in a couple of leagues where I have him. Christian Kirk just signed a market-setting free agent deal in Jacksonville to presumably be their wide receiver 1. And to this point in his career, he has never shown the ability to be a wide receiver 1. Up to this point in his career, he's never finished inside the top 26 in fantasy scoring. So this is a great opportunity to sell a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 to a league mate who might be betting on, wide receiver 1 upside. You're selling a huge market deal, and you are selling an idea of a juicy landing spot, when in return you're selling nothing that's overly sexy, I guess would be a way of putting it. So try to take advantage of the news and sell high.
Yeah, especially targeting, maybe if you go after the guy in your league that owns Trevor Lawrence, that might be the stack he wants. If you're making a bet on him, you're making a bet on Lawrence. They kind of go together. So that might be a perfect opportunity to be going after somebody in that league, especially if you have Lawrence, who might be a younger team, is a younger wide receiver that could have the potential to break out to be the one. So you might be able to sell off, like Zach mentioned, the news. I like it. Armand, who's your sell?
All right, my sell. I had a hard time picking this one. Some names that I thought of was the Miami backfield here, but I instead went with a former Miami Dolphin running back in Kenyon Drake, who's now with the Las Vegas Raiders. He was with them last year as well. And we saw in that offense, he was extremely inefficient when he was running the ball last year. And even when he was in the passing game, he wasn't very efficient when he was getting targets thrown towards him. The Raiders have Josh Jacobs there as their number 1 running back. They're looking for a good receiving back, third down passing game kind of back. And they just signed Abdullah and Zach's favorite player in the world, Bolden, to contracts. And those guys are both guys who have kind of made their career so far in the NFL as those pass catching backs, and they're a bit more efficient in that role than Drake, at least on their respective teams over the last few years. Abdullah even was looking really good in Carolina. He almost looked like the best player there near the end of the season last year. So I don't know if many people still have Drake on their roster or still looking at Drake to produce for them, but I'd be getting rid of him if you got him. Try and sell him before it comes out that I could even see him cut by the time the end of preseason rolls around here. So I'd be careful with Drake and be trying to move him while he's still got a little bit of name value.
Especially going into what you mentioned there too. They look how good that AFC West is. They're gonna have to move the ball, right? Like they're gonna have to pass the ball a lot. They're not gonna be in a position to be running the ball as often as they did last year. And if they do, that's Josh Jacobs' season, I think. So I agree with you on that one, Armand. Looking at my sell, I threw in another name here, Allen Lazard. I think that's one you can capitalize on opportunity right now. Obviously, Green Bay doesn't have their wide receiver one right now. That is Allen Lazard, I would say, especially coming off a couple big games last year as a wide receiver two. So you could kind of spin it off that like, hey, Allen Lazard, wide receiver one here for Green Bay. You might be able to kind of flip him and get some immediate value there before Green Bay goes and signs out a big name or it takes off trades for a first round talented wide receiver. So that's a name I threw out there just for a little tidbit. But the name that I want to go, it's a bit juicy. And there can be some ramifications that come with this one because it is a big name. And it's DJ Moore coming off a huge extension, the 3-year, $60 million deal. DJ Moore, don't get me wrong, is an incredibly talented wide receiver. But unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to hit. He's kind of like a Terry McLaurin. We talked about a little bit. He's part of that QB carousel where he just keeps getting a new quarterback that can't get on the ball, and this hasn't given the opportunity to break out. Now, obviously, Carolina missing on all these big names. Are they going to get Baker? Is that an upgrade? Is that what you want? Are they going to have to draft a rookie? Is that the answer? Who knows? So there's a window now where we really don't know who DJ Moore's quarterback is going to be for the foreseeable future. And in looking in that 3-year deal, they could try and pick up a free agent. They could stick with Darno. They could go with a Fitzpatrick. Maybe that'll help them a little bit. Maybe they draft a quarterback. It's not the answer. They try and draft again in 2 years. All of a sudden, DJ Moore's contract's expiring. So I think take the talent and take the extension and the money and try and flip that into something that's a little bit proven and is in a comfortable position, because DJ Moore is a good wide receiver, but he's in a position where that he's like QB purgatory. Yeah, you got all the talent in the world, but you got to get the ball. And if you don't get the ball, you're not going to get me points in fantasy football. So I know this is a bit of a sketchy one, but I think DJ Moore is somebody I might maybe flipping, and maybe say the Devontae Adams owner is a little bit scared. DJ Moore for Devontae Adams, that might be a deal you could get done lickety split. So that's I know it might be a hot take-ish, I think, but that's where I'm going with my sell. Speaking of hot takes here, Zach, you ready? We'll get the drop and we'll get you going. So a brand new drop for Ice Cold Hot Takes. Here she goes.
You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. I'm on fire.
Will Ferrell gets a lot of love on this podcast. All right, Zach, Ice Cold Hot Take. First one of the offseason. Let's hear it.
So I don't even know if this qualifies necessarily as a hot take, but it is a belief of mine that the NFL has made a grave mistake by having the free agency happen before the NFL draft. In my opinion, the NFL draft should happen before NFL free agency, for the simple reason that as a players union, the union represents veteran players, and oftentimes we see free agents, mid-level players, sign mid-level contracts or veteran minimum contracts only to be replaced a month or two later by cheaper rookie talent. So I'm talking this year about guys like Mitchell Trubisky, guys maybe like Rashad Penny, guys that sign these cheaper short-term deals with either with their previous team or with a new team, and they may be in a position where they are replaced, in the not so distant future. Would it be crazy for a Pittsburgh to draft a Kenny Pickett or a Malik Willis at 20 overall and replace Trubisky, who signed with the intention of being the starter? I don't think so, not by a long shot. Is it possible that a Spiller or a Walker slips to the middle part of the second round, or maybe middle part of the third round, and Seattle drafts one of them? I don't think so. And I could see a situation where they supplant Penny, who probably re-signed with Seattle with the expectation of being their starter this year, or at least competing for that starting spot along with Chris Carson. So I think, in my mind, the NFL draft should be held before free agency, just so these veteran players who are members of the NFL Players Union are able to make a informed choice of where they take their talents.
In that situation too, where you draft, the free agent market, I think, would probably heat up a little bit depending on what would happen, right? Say, for example, you don't get the wide receiver you want in the draft, i.e. the Philadelphia Eagles when they got jumped by, or I guess not say jumped, but their guy got stolen there. Was that 2020 draft when they ended up losing out on, and then they panicked and took, I'm trying to remember the whole draft, how it ended up working out. Regardless,
They took Rieger.
yeah, and they taken Rieger. Yeah, 'cause they panicked, and regardless, however it shook down there, team like that maybe doesn't get the wide receiver they wanted. They don't panic, take a wide receiver. They take a defensive player, offensive lineman, or whatever it is at the I think it's the 15th overall, something like that. And then they sign a wide receiver in the free agency. That's somebody that's available. Then they make those decisions in the draft maybe a little bit easier. You don't have to panic because it's not your last options to try and pick players up, where you have that free agency grace period too. I think it'd be interesting. I think there'd be definitely some speed bumps and some hurdles to try and get over top. And I think that maybe it could end up playing into owners and a little bit coming down to contract time, where I don't have to give you this much money because I just took maybe the free agent market might saturate. I don't know. It's an interesting concept though, but I think in the minds of the players, especially the lower end players, this might be definitely to their benefit.
Well, in the end, with those guys getting cut though, it shouldn't saturate the free agent market too much, right? Because if those guys are getting cut because of the draft earlier, then it ends up in the same result. They're either not signed as a free agent at all, or they're cut. Either way, they end up in the free agent pool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's not where I thought you were going, Zach. You said you had one. Yeah, I should think about for a while. It fits the mold for the episode, though. That's for sure.
It's something that I've thought for a while. Like we see it often where these mid-level players sign contracts and they get their draft cap, or players with higher draft capital replace them within the first year. And these veteran players that occur seasons towards, a pension, towards healthcare, they're on the receiving end of the bad news.
Yeah, I definitely see the merit to it for sure. Especially for the middle tier guys, those high end guys, they're going to get their money regardless, and it's not impacting them. But it's the guys that need the money, that need those short term deals to try and basically kind of keep their life on track and help their families out, that kind of get the worst end of the stick. Anything else to add here, fellas, before we wrap this one up?
No, I think we're good to go.
Right on. So thank you everybody for listening to episode number 44. I know we went a few in a row there, which we said we weren't going to do, but free agency was just too juicy. So that'll do it for episode number 44. We're going to be back in action in 2 weeks' time. So you'll have to stay tuned for that one. But on behalf of Armand, Zach, myself, and the 306 Fantasy Football crew, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our big drop on our upcoming brand new sponsor of the year. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Talk soon.